So how likely is it that you're going to ask your boss for a raise and your boss is going to say, leave and never come back, right? It's not like, and even if that happened, what are you going to do then? You'll find another job.
The student was able to negotiate a 2.5 times, not percentage, but 2.5 times greater raise than what had originally been proposed.
It is absolutely about the preparation and the learning and the framing and the strategy and all of those things. If you don't do the work to look inside yourself too, you may very well be missing an opportunity. Because if we can't get ourselves aligned with ourselves, it's going to be really hard to come across in the ways where we can be most effective.
Don't go in mad. If you feel frustrated and angry, try to calm down. If you go in angry, you're not going to do as good a job. And the other thing is, think hard about what it is you're going to ask for. Don't ask for something measly that's easy for them to give. And in general, if it's easy for them to give whatever you're asking for, you probably weren't asking for enough.
We are really good at teaching people skills and strategies, and then they go to use them and they choke. More often than not, what gets in the way is their emotions. I can't tell you how many of my students have come to me and said, I negotiate every day for my boss, with clients, with vendors, but I can't negotiate with my boss when it comes to my own career. And I ask them, what's different? It's the same skills. And what's different is that when it's them, all of their emotions come in, they feel stressed and they shut down. However, those fears are so powerful that they prevent people from negotiating. They make people rush through their negotiations. They make people back off at the first sign of resistance. And if you're aware that that's going on, then you can manage it. One of the things that I ask people when I coach them in their negotiation is, what are you afraid might happen? If you ask for this, what's actually going to happen? I said, how likely is it that you're going to ask your boss for a raise and your boss is going to say, leave and never come back, right? It's not like, and even if that happened, what are you going to do then? You'll find another job. This isn't the only place you can work. So once people can start thinking through their fears, they become a lot more manageable. They can get their arms around them.
If you were negotiating for a person that looks like, sounds like, things like you, right? But you're negotiating on their behalf rather than on your own behalf, how would that change the way in which you approach that? I don't know if that framing may work too.
I often ask them to step outside of themselves. So I might ask them to say, who's the person in your life who thinks you are an absolute rock star? And if they had to go in and sort of be your agent in this conversation, what would they say? Good, write it down, practice it. Sometimes just building the neural pathways, right? Getting those words out of your own mouth and not having the sky fall down is a really powerful experience. So the real opportunity becomes, how do we understand someone and meet them where they are? It is absolutely about the preparation and the learning and the framing and the strategy and all of those things. If you don't do the work to look inside yourself too, you may very well be missing an opportunity. Because if we can't get ourselves aligned with ourselves, it's going to be really hard to come across. What I observed over the course of my time doing the negotiation work is, there are lots of people who really need the advice and the skills. And sometimes that makes a really big difference for people. And then they would go out to have the big negotiation. And for whatever reason, just revert back to exactly what they had done in the past. So if I'm going into a negotiation and I fear that I'm never going to make headway, it doesn't really matter what words I'm saying, but if that's the story that's raging in the back of my head, I can't connect that storyline internally. It's very little I'm going to be able to say and very few tools that are going to save me from that. Negotiation was about aggressiveness, and we had to really find a different frame. And so in our conversations, we worked through it, and he said, maybe I don't need to be aggressive. Maybe I can just be assertive. In the new environment that he was in, the strong negotiators were very aggressive. And so he was struggling with do I meet them where they are and then risk showing up as that guy, which he was deeply committed not to. And you can imagine all of the reasons why in our society that would carry some consequences, right? And so it was just that little shift to go from aggressiveness to assertiveness that freed him up. And within a couple of weeks, he'd basically closed off everything he needed to close off and launched the part of the business he was looking to launch and brought on the partners he was looking to bring on. And he was done. He didn't really need anything. Not even the preparation, to be honest. He just needed to shift his perspective. Internal work and building those connections inside ourselves and finding the stories that we've been telling consciously or unconsciously that are getting in our way.
It's a common question about how do I apply these skills to negotiate more effectively for a salary, for a new position, or even for a pay raise, whether you're with a company or whether you are just trying to get on with the company. In this case, my student had been with the company for not quite a year, but then came up time to discuss a potential raise. And really, again, thinking about the things we've talked about in so many podcasts before, the student was just sharp about thinking about how to leverage the relationship that he had with the manager and developed over the last year to really, dig into what interests there were, take time to, consider what jobs were out there if they had to walk away. So the idea of alternatives, really get creative around potential options and also think about what are fair comparisons, throughout. Just transparent, open communication both ways, lots of good questioning. And then finally, thinking about committing to come back after some time after having discussed it. And at the end, the student was able to negotiate a 2.5 times, not percentage, but 2.5 times greater raise than what had originally been proposed. So no, you don't always negotiate. If you came to me today, Nolan, with a proposal or an offer that satisfied my interests in whole, because I really wanted to work for you, I really wanted this job, what you were offering me was incredibly fair, why would I negotiate that further and risk damage to the relationship, risk a possible no when that didn't need to be that way, or even risk, if you were to agree to something greater, risk putting you at some greater risk. So I don't think you always negotiate. And I think that when you do, there's a few things we can get into in terms of advice and principles that are pretty applicable.
So everyone's interests need to be aligned. And so I think that a smart NEGOTIATEx listener going into the salary negotiation just needs to understand, where can I gain some ground and where should I just not push?
Sure. Well, the first big difference is men just do it more. One study Linda did showed that men negotiate for themselves at work, so for things that will help them get ahead professionally, 4 times as frequently as women do. So that means if every quarter, every 3 months or so, you as a woman gets up your nerve and goes in and asks for something that will help you get ahead, the typical man is doing that 16 times a year. He may not be getting everything he's asking for, but simply because he is asking for so many more big and little things, he is going to move ahead of you faster if you're a woman. The other thing is that men aim higher when they do negotiate. They feel more entitled to get rewarded for what they're doing. And one study showed that they ask for 30% more than women do. Women are apparently more likely to have their self-esteem fluctuate a little more in response to negative feedback, criticism, whatever, unfavorable evaluations, that kind of thing. Men's tend to be a little bit more stable. And so women often don't negotiate because they're afraid of getting turned down. They're afraid of no. And that can be a really self-defeating approach. This isn't really a women's problem. This is a social problem. It's an organizational problem, and it cannot be fixed just by women raising their hands a little bit more often. I can help one woman at a time kind of, improve her situation, get ahead, but we're not going to get wholesale change until organizations take the lead. So, number one, detailed, specific evaluation systems that are transparent and applied equally to everybody. So try to get subjective judgments out of the decision making about who gets promoted, who gets offered particular opportunities. There's studies that show that even people who do not think, men and women who don't think they have any problems, any biases about women in the workplace, when presented with identical work products, but one has a male name and the other has a female name, they will evaluate the one with the female name as inferior to that by somebody, with a male name. When men and women apply for jobs, men's CVs are taken more seriously, rated more highly than women's. When people recommend women for other positions within the organization, they use more muted, modified descriptors in supporting them, recommending them. They use more superlatives when they talk about men. So the evaluation system is really important to try to get those subjective biases, which are often unconscious. It's not that people are trying to discriminate against women. We all are the products of the noise of the culture that we have grown up in. So there's that. Then there is also, I know you said you want to direct this to some degree at middle managers. A lot of women seem to get stuck at that middle management level. So even if the top boss is saying, we want women to get ahead, we want more opportunities for women, somehow the guys in the middle don't get that message or haven't been mentored or trained to be more open to that. So the mentoring, the training is important. The other thing that works really well is to attach managers' evaluations, their performance evaluations, to how well the women they supervise move ahead, how well they're doing. And certain organizations have done this where they not only say your performance evaluations are going to be tied to how the women or minorities you supervise get ahead, but we are going to publish it quarterly. So all your competitors in this organization, all, the people at your level or the people who are, potentially maybe going to give you some opportunities, throw some good stuff your way, they're going to know you're not doing as well. And people are really competitive. So if you know just that the guy in the, next office down or around at the other wing is doing this better than you are, you're going to get busy. A lot of people get really busy trying to make a change.
And we will see you in the next episode.